It's around 1500 BCE. You're standing at the edge of the Egyptian desert, and there is absolutely nothing in front of you. No road, no sign, no gas station, no satellite map telling you which direction to go. And you're about to cross it. Today, we can drive across the Sahara with air conditioning, GPS, bottled water, and a phone that can tell you exactly where you are. The ancient Egyptians had none of that. So how did they cross one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth? Here's the strange part. The Egyptians weren't trapped by the desert. They used it. The desert was dangerous, but it was also a highway. And the secret wasn't one magical invention. It was knowing where to stop. Because if you're crossing the Egyptian desert, water is not a convenience. It's the difference between arriving and dying. And the Egyptians knew the desert well enough to map its water, not with GPS coordinates, with landmarks, memory, experience, and routes passed from one traveler to another. A particular mountain, a line of rocks, a dry valley that only looks completely dry until you know where to dig. A well. These things could mean the difference between a successful expedition and a disaster. And then there was the animal that made desert travel possible long before the camel became Egypt's famous desert taxi: the donkey. Donkeys were incredibly useful. They could carry heavy loads while surviving on surprisingly little food and water. That meant a trader didn't have to carry everything on his own back. A single donkey could turn a human walking expedition into a supply operation. And this matters because ancient Egyptian travel wasn't always one person walking from one place to another. Sometimes it was a huge logistical operation. Imagine dozens of workers, guides, merchants, animals, food, tools, pottery containers, and water jars moving together across hundreds of kilometers of empty-looking terrain. That takes planning. And the desert itself was full of clues. Here's another thing modern people get wrong about deserts. A desert can look completely empty and still be full of information. A particular mountain could tell you where you were. A line of stones could mark a route. A dry valley could hide water beneath its surface. A well could turn a dangerous stretch of desert into a predictable journey. And experienced guides knew these things. They didn't need a blue line on a screen. They carried the route inside their heads. The Egyptians developed routes connecting the Nile Valley with distant regions, including the Red Sea and mineral-rich areas of the Eastern Desert. Some expeditions were searching for gold. Others were looking for copper, stone, incense, or other valuable materials. And these journeys could be enormous. The desert wasn't just something Egypt had to survive. It was part of Egypt's economy. But there was another problem: the heat. You don't beat desert heat by simply being tougher. You beat it by traveling intelligently. Travel early when the temperature is lower. Rest during the worst part of the day. Protect your water. Then move again when the heat begins to fall. The timing of the journey could matter almost as much as the route itself. Because the desert doesn't care how strong you are. If you lose too much water, strength doesn't matter anymore. And here's what really surprised me. The Egyptians weren't just surviving the desert. They were using it to connect their civilization to the outside world. Gold came through it. Copper came through it. Incense came through it. People came through it. And information came through it. Think about what that means. When you look at ancient Egypt, it's easy to imagine a civilization sitting beside the Nile, surrounded by sand. But that isn't really the picture. The Nile was the center. The desert was the network around it. Routes crossed the barren landscape and connected Egypt with places that would otherwise have been incredibly difficult to reach. And the people traveling those routes weren't just carrying objects. They were carrying knowledge. A merchant could learn something in a distant region and bring it back. A worker could travel to a mining settlement. A foreign trader could arrive with unfamiliar goods. A guide could teach another traveler where the next water source was. And over generations, that knowledge became a kind of invisible map. There is something almost strange about that. We think of maps as something you look at. For these travelers, the map was often something they remembered. A mountain, a valley, a well, a sequence of landmarks, a route someone had taught them. And if they got it wrong, there wasn't an app waiting to recalculate the journey. There was just the desert. So when you imagine ancient Egypt, don't picture only pyramids and temples. Picture the road that connected them. A road without asphalt, without signs, without GPS, and without a single kilometer marker telling you how far you had left to go. Just memory, water, animals, landmarks, and thousands of years of accumulated knowledge. And somehow, that was enough to cross the desert. Which makes the ancient Egyptian desert traveler look very different from the way we usually imagine him. He wasn't simply a person walking through an empty wasteland. He was part of a transportation system. A system built from animals, water sources, human memory, environmental knowledge, and routes that had been learned and reused over generations. The desert wasn't an empty space between civilizations. It was the thing they had learned to navigate. And maybe that's the most interesting part. Because the ancient Egyptians didn't conquer the desert by making it disappear. They learned how to read it. So if you had to cross the Egyptian desert tomorrow with only one thing from the ancient Egyptians, water, a donkey, a map, or a guide, which one are you taking?